Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Stone Delicatessen Restaurant. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette and Liberal MP Anthony Housefather. Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Well, wait a second. Liberal MP for how long?
Well, we're going to get to that. First of all, you've been a fairly dull week or at least past couple of weeks for you. Certainly haven't been the focus of controversy.
Certainly not.
No, not at all. Look, I should point out, we were hoping you would tell us during the podcast what you have decided to do. I offered you Danish. I offered you water and tea and
smoked meat.
Nothing.
Yeah.
You have not yet decided what you're going to do, have you?
No, I haven't. I'm really experiencing what I think a lot of liberal members of the Jewish community have been experiencing across Canada, which is a lot of existential angst about what we truly believe in these days. And I think most politicians would never have made this public. You certainly would never say that you're exploring your options publicly, but I believe that there's so many other people that are going through exactly what I'm going through that I want to be open and transparent about it. And I also want, my constituents to be able to weigh in as to what they think I should do. I was deeply disillusioned over the last little while about my government's failure to tackle anti-Semitism domestically. My Jewish community is really fearful, intimidated, worried based on the demonstrations, what's happening on campuses across Canada. And then it's compounded by foreign affairs decisions where I feel that we've moved away from what we promised in previous elections, Canada's traditional policy of supporting our ally Israel. And the vote last Monday in the House of Commons, where my Liberal colleagues got up and gave a standing ovation to an NDP MP that put forward an egregiously anti-Israel motion, really caused me to, it was a catalyst to say I really need to reflect on whether I still have a voice in place in the Liberal Party, which I would have hoped, and because I believe in these parties that embrace everybody and where, all voices count and all voices matter, or whether my voice is no longer heard, in which case I should make a change to go to a party that does more represent in that issue, which is existential to me at this time, what my community is, my community thinks should be done.
But you've been a lifelong liberal, I know this, and it's got to be very trying for you now. I mean, there's talk about Mr. Polyev wants you very much so to join his team, and I'm sure you've thought about that, being an independent and all the rest. But in terms of core values, does this require a radical change in thought for you to go from one party to another? Because you've espoused a lot of these liberal values over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I still believe that I'm a liberal. Like, in the sense that I believe that in the party that Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin headed, I'm a standard liberal. I mean, but I'm a centrist liberal. I'm somebody who believes in a strong charter of rights. I believe in a strong central government that fights back when provinces overstep their bounds, including on Bill 21 and Bill 96. I believe in a government that has a principled foreign policy that defends our Western allies and stands with the United States and our other partners, and doesn't reward Iran that's funding Hamas and Hezbollah. And so when I ask why we haven't declared the IRGC a terrorist organization as the House of Commons has voted, why is Tamadou not a terrorist organization? Like, there are things where I believe I'm a classical liberal. The question is, what party now represents those classical liberals? And also I have to acknowledge that right now, while only 30% of my riding is Jewish, but that's an important part of my riding. It's the second greatest percentage of any riding in Canada. The fears and the complete strife that community is in right now, which is not being responded to, weighs very heavily on me. And so I'm living in this real vortex where what I always thought was true is no longer as clear to me.
So I guess the question, as I hear you answer Bill's question, is, given your views, where you are politically, can you be, for lack of a better way to put it, can you be an independent within the Liberal Party?
I have to figure this out, right? Like, and you can't be an independent in the Liberal Party, but I could say that I'm going back to the Liberal Party to fight for a vision of the Liberal Party that is more in line with mine, and not giving up the territory and recognizing that things change over time. And that's certainly one option. And if I feel that that's a possibility, that my voice will be heard and that my community's voice will be heard and things might change, that's certainly an option.
But can you be a singular voice within that party? I mean, what power do you have that way?
Well, again, this is all what I'm figuring out, right? Marco Mendicino, Ben Carr, and I were singular voices on the vote that Monday. And I was a singular voice on the vote on the Charter of the French language being integrated into the Official Languages Act.
Right.
Because I'm always going to believe the same thing. Like, I am not going to change regardless of where I am in the House of Commons. My views are the same, and me standing up for the community is going to be the same. It's just a question of where my views align the most these days. And, and on foreign policy right now, which I think is a big issue right now, I think the Western world is facing a real threat from autocratic states. That to me is now a big issue. And on that, am I in line with the current position of my party?
I'm assuming that the party has reached out to you because there's no way in the world they want to lose your riding, one of the most steadfast liberal ridings for ever and ever and ever, since 1940 or something.
1940.
Yeah, that it has been liberal. Has anybody reached out to you? Has the Prime Minister reached out to you, try to encourage you to stay within the fold? Someone must have.
I mean,
it would be a huge loss.
Yeah, I mean, many people, many of my colleagues have reached out. I spoke to the Prime Minister the Monday of the vote. We had a long meeting. I haven't spoken to him since then. But there are many other members of cabinet and members of caucus that have reached out. And I'm talking to everybody that reaches out to me, pretty much. But, again, a lot of this, I'm more interested, honestly, in my constituents, what they tell me, and what I end up thinking, and it's a hard, challenging question. It's not easy. I just feel that all the things that I believed were the Liberal Party views, and that I defended, are no longer as clearly the Liberal Party views. But doesn't mean that they won't one day again be the Liberal Party views, which is again why I have to figure this out. Do I belong or not?
As you describe this, I can't help but think to myself, you're describing a political situation where the Liberals now federally are basically trying to play both sides against the middle, right? As far as foreign policy, Israel, Hamas is concerned, which ends up, I think, upsetting both sides and achieving nothing. That part of the concern?
Yes. I mean, I that's exactly, I don't know if that's intentional or not, but the effect, of course, has been that both sides are strongly displeased with where you are. To me, there's no moral equivalency here. A terrorist organization attacked a democratic Western ally. You may be unhappy with how the Western democratic ally is prosecuting the war, but the end result of, for example, this resolution that says you cannot even ship non-lethal arms to Israel, to me is ludicrous, because Hamas and Hezbollah are terrorist organizations. Both of them are armed by Iran. Nothing in our resolution stops Iran from arming Hamas and Hezbollah that fire missiles on a daily basis into Israel. And if the entire Western world, which I assume we would want, if we adopt something in Canada, we would want the other countries to follow us. If they all followed that practice, then Israel wouldn't be armed to defend itself against terrorist groups on its borders, and nothing would please Iran more. So to me, this is just a foreign policy that I can't subscribe to.
I would ask as well, just to move away from that and talk about your future. It's clearly not coincidence that the Conservatives, once this news broke, and I don't know if we can tie the two indirectly together, Melissa Lantsman, who is, of course, Poilievre's right-hand woman, goes to your riding, meets with individual groups, community groups, and then last week, Poilievre showed up at a synagogue in Côte Saint Luc.
And he does very few appearances here.
Yeah, talked about, standing ovations, how receptive the audience was. This is obviously being done because now, I guess the Conservatives are seeing a crack in the Liberal riding, right, and thinking they can win this. I'm just curious what your reaction to that is.
Well, I think that certainly the Jewish community, it would be impossible to not say, has become very disillusioned, and they feel very abandoned by what happened in Monday's vote, and they feel very abandoned by the lack of action by all governments at all levels on anti-Semitism. I've been pushing so hard for us to have a national summit on anti-Semitism, for us to take action on college campuses. I myself wrote a letter to all the university presidents across Canada and moved a motion to have a study start at the Justice Committee, and I think I've done more individually than the government has done. And that's crazy. So I understand why my Jewish community feels at odds, but I hope they all feel that I best represent them as an MP, regardless of my decision. And that I think a lot of people are telling me. But I understand why the Conservatives would certainly see an opportunity with Jewish communities across the country.
Well, never mind across the country. To your riding specifically,
Yeah.
they have spent a lot of time and made a lot of effort to go in there to talk to people in that community. And I wonder, so it's not a surprise that you're suggesting is happening. I wonder, though, is that them saying, hey, look, Anthony, look at the support we have here. Why don't you join our team?
And of course, that's certainly a possibility. And I think that what you are seeing is in the Mount Royal riding, the Jewish community would like now to vote Conservative. But a lot of them would prefer to vote for me, and I stopped the Conservatives from winning that riding. But the non-Jewish members of the Mount Royal riding, for many other reasons, are not necessarily directly affected by this issue. And people perceive, a lot of the people living in Hampstead and Côte St. Luc believe that the riding is Hampstead and Côte St. Luc, and so many percentage of the riding is Jewish. In the end, the riding is Jewish, but it's not anywhere near as Jewish as the people in Hampstead and Côte St. Luc believe it is. We have TMR, we have Snowdon-Côte-Neige. TMR is only about 8% Jewish, Snowdon-Côte-Neige is only about 16% Jewish. So the Hampstead-Côte St. Luc figures are not the riding figures, and nobody can win this riding on the Jewish community alone. And so I'm really out there listening to all communities in the riding to see what they want me to do, not just the Jewish community. I'm meeting with the Filipino community, I'm meeting with other communities, and doing door-to-door in places like TMR. Because I want my decision here is not just my decision, it's also a decision of all the, I'll never get everybody. There are going to be people very unhappy with whatever I decide. But I'm trying to involve all the riding residents in giving them the opportunity to reach out to me, and thousands of them have.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the home of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus Carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen.
The mayor of Hampstead, in light of Mr. Poilievre's visit here, was going on talking about how if you were to go to the Conservative side, which he wished you would do, you would probably be a cabinet minister, because at this point it looks very likely that the Conservatives would win a majority, and said that was a no-brainer almost. But you're too clever to fall for stuff like that, I think, because it's beyond cabinet positions for you. I think it's ideology that matters a lot more than anything, my understanding of you.
Yes.
Did Jeremy Levi reach out to you personally, to Bill's point?
I mean, Jeremy he's one of my mayors. I talk to my mayors all the time. He did not consult me before putting out his tweets, but I talk to Jeremy all the time. I consider him a friend. I consider Mitch Brownstein a great friend. I consider Peter Maloof a great friend. Sonny Moreau, Stephanie Valenzuela, who are the councillors from Montreal in my territory, I consider great friends. I believe in building the relationships with the elected officials. The same with Elizabeth Prast and Michelle Satliqui on the provincial level. So they're all friends.
But to the point that they think that you should jump because it would give them a cabinet position in a new government. That's one. But has Mr. Poilievre reached out to you directly?
I would never say, I have not had any personal meeting with Mr. Poilievre yet. I have Conservative colleagues who have certainly reached out, saying, and saying I'd be welcome. That's very nice of them. I think the main thing for me, as you said, Bill, is I always try to be principled. I always try to do what I think my constituents would want me to do. And in this case, there's a divided group of constituents, right? I got elected as Liberal. I'm very conscious of that. But a lot of my constituents have come forward and said, we want you to consider joining the Conservatives. And many of them say we feel unable to vote for the Liberal Party, and you put us in a difficult position. And my own feelings about what happened and what's happened over the last months, I think mirror my constituents. And so as a result, I'm really taking the time to reflect, can I be a voice in the Liberal Party still that makes a difference or not?
So when do you think you'll make a decision?
I want to ask, with respect, you just said, I know when we spoke, you said you have friends on the Conservative Party, understandably. You've been in the Commons, you meet people, you have friends. As someone within the Liberal Party, come to you and said, Anthony, we know you're unhappy. We understand how you feel. Can we sit down and talk more about this? Beyond the meeting, the first meeting or only meeting you had with the Prime Minister, any other party members sit down and say they want to speak?
Again, I've talked to many of my colleagues. Again, many of my colleagues have reached out, saying that we want you to stay in caucus. We value you as a friend and a team member, and I value all of them as friends and team members. Like my decision would not be based at all on personal feelings about anybody. I have high respect for Justin Trudeau. I have high respect for all of my colleagues, all of my friends and colleagues. We may disagree on policy, but they're my friends and they're my and my extended family, and I care about them a lot. Marco Mendicino, for example, and Againi, I've spoken to them almost daily. Like they, I know they want me to stay.
I would ask one other thing, and that is, and I don't know whether you've heard this or not, there are people out there, and I bring this up because after we spoke on the radio, I started hearing from people, text messages, etc., saying, you know what, I think Anthony Housefather's playing this a little too long. He's playing the long game here. I don't like the fact that he's kind of holding voters, in a sense, hostage until he decides what it is he wants to do. So there are some people out there cynically looking at this as you having, I guess, too much of a personal decision in here as opposed to a party decision in here. Have you heard that? Does that bother you? I mean,
I haven't. I haven't. But I mean, how am I holding anybody hostage? I'm still doing my job as an MP. I mean, how is it affecting them in any way, other than seeing that there are politicians out there that are really reflect about things and want to get back constituent feedback on things and don't automatically make decisions without getting proper feedback from everybody in the riding. I mean, I don't know how. If I had just said one day, I'm joining another party, what would that have done to my riding with no warning, no ability to weigh in on it? I don't know what the timing, how they're hostage. I don't know how anybody's hostage at all.
Well,
No,
I
but
mean, once you
eventually
make
have to
that
pick-
decision, though,
Yeah.
they're saying, well, you need a week or two or whatever.
Yeah.
You're even now. This is now almost a month.
Yes.
No.
Well,
No.
a couple of weeks, 3
3
weeks
weeks.
since this happened.
No, it's a week. It's a week.
Is
What-
it?
Yeah,
It seems like a lot longer.
it's a week.
So when are you making your decision is the point.
Oh, I believe I have to make that decision before the House of Commons resumes,
And
right?
that's
Well, it's next week. Not this week. The next week.
following week.
Yeah. I have about 10 more days before the House resumes,
And
because before I go back to the House, I have to know, am I committed or not to go back into the Liberal caucus, or do I do something different?
So you'll come here first and tell us before you do that.
Yeah, it's just very, very funny when you said it's been a little over a week. To me, it seems we've been talking about this now for so long. It seems like weeks, but it's not.
No.
Okay.
No, the vote was last week.
Okay, it's just one of those stories that I guess has gained so much momentum since. I also asked you at the time, and I know you're not going to reveal necessarily who. We don't know. We don't care about who. You have constituents. I mean, I heard from them. You've obviously heard from them, and I think you said at the beginning you were overwhelmed by the reaction you got from your constituents. What has been that reaction? What have people said to you? What have they suggested to you?
Well, the majority of members of the Jewish community have, so let's start with a lot of people. I think the majority have said, I stick with you whatever you do, which is great. I think a majority of the emails I've gotten from the Jewish community and people I've talked to in the Jewish community would prefer that I go to the Conservatives, but not all. And there's a significant minority there that say, well, even, for whatever reason, you shouldn't do it, even if they would prefer to vote for the Conservatives. But they not everybody.
You shouldn't do it.
But I shouldn't do it. And then I would say the majority of people from other communities have said, we would prefer if you stay as a Liberal, although again, a very significant number have said, but we'll go with you if you go to the Conservatives, but we'd rather you stay a Liberal. So I've listened to everybody. It's not been clear and convincing in one direction or another. Different people from different communities have different perspectives.
Yeah, it's not your first rupture with the Liberals, of course. Like as we recall from the Bill 21, 96, and all the rest, where you were dropped from your position and then reinstated afterwards. So there has been friction.
I mean, I voted against the languages bill because I think it was wrong. But I don't feel that it was the same issue, right? I never at that time contemplated.
with the party.
Yeah, well, I mean, I voted against. I mean, everybody has times that they're against their party, but that wasn't to me one of those cases where I thought about leaving the party. Also, because at the time, no other party took a position, that would have favored the Anglophone community. But I didn't even think about it then. I've never thought about it in my whole life until now, and I think again what I want everybody to understand, because those who aren't in the Jewish community, obviously I represent everybody, may not have this deep, set of fears that most Jewish Canadians right now have about what's happening in Canada. But I am from that community, and I feel it, and I feel the 30% of my constituents who feel that, and so it's impossible for me to divorce that fear and the feeling that we've done nothing to combat it from my overall feelings about whether I have a place in the party or not, given again all of the things that I've suggested we do that haven't yet happened. So I'm really at a point where I'm in deep reflection. Do I stay and keep fighting for the kind of liberal party I believe in, and for things like anti-Semitism summits and work on the university campuses, or not?
You raise a very interesting point, because yes, federal government, provincial government. What about the city government? A lot of people have been very outspoken to the fact that they don't feel enough has been done locally here in terms of combating the same issues you're talking about.
Oh, 100%. The failure, people unfortunately personify it to the Prime Minister and blame only the federal government. In large measure, it's a failure of all three levels of government, and the municipal and provincial governments are more responsible for the things that people are concerned about. For example, post-secondary education is a provincial responsibility, not a federal one. Policing is a municipal responsibility. So there's been an abject failure by the mayor of Montreal, in my view, on this issue. And the police are waiting for leadership. They're waiting to be told, you're supposed to police demonstrations. You're not supposed to just be innocent bystanders, letting buildings be barricaded and blocked for hours and hours and hours. And that's what happened at the Federation building a few weeks ago. And that's all part of my angst, right? Because I'm watching what's happening in my community. I'm listening to people tell me that they're wondering about moving to the United States and whether or not they should leave Canada. Not just taking down mezuzahs off doors, not just worried about sending their kids to schools, but should they actually leave our country that our community has been in since 1760? So that impacts a person. And that is what really has driven this. People think it's the vote about Israel. That's just the end result of a long stretch of things where the Jewish community, I think, has felt more and more marginalized and isolated.
I will ask if we can go back to the bigger picture here. You used the words, I know this is what you said since the get-go, you're in deep reflection. Some people might wonder, between now and when the House resumes sitting, what would it take for you to say, okay, this is the tipping point, here's what makes my decision? Nothing is going to change between now and then. Policy-wise, are you expecting an announcement of some kind from the government? Do you hope the Prime Minister reaches out? I mean, what would it take for you to make that, ultimately to reach that decision?
No, I mean, I don't, I'm not asking for anything. Obviously, I'd love the government to announce a national summit on anti-Semitism, which I've been asking for 5 months. I would love the government to announce something on post-secondary education, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for some personal handout. I'm much more trying to come to terms with whether I believe that my voice for my community remains important in the Liberal Party, and that my voice will be heard on an issue and other issues that I care fundamentally about or not. And if not, then I have to find some other home. And if yes, well, then that's a different thing. And I have to figure that out for myself. I have to figure that out. And again, talking to colleagues, talking to constituents, gives me more light every day. But that's sort of all that I'm really thinking about.
To Bill's question earlier on about Jeremy Levi just coming out and saying you should run for the Conservatives, they give you a cabinet post. Just to post a hypothetical, if that was the case and someone from the party reached out, Pierre Poilievre, or anybody from the Conservatives reached out and said, look, join our party, we appreciate what you stand for, we respect what you stand for, and there'd be a cabinet post involved, would that change your mind at all?
No, because I shouldn't be looking at it from the perspective of whether or not I'm going to be in cabinet. That's a personal thing and a personal gain, and maybe it's a gain for the community too, but I really need to first make an overall decision, and again, of course, there would be lots of other issues if I decide to take that step. But
there'd be a lot of backtalk too, saying that maybe you've been exploiting the situation just to do that. So there's the whole other side to that equation.
I hope that people know me well enough to know that I'm not seeking to exploit anything. I'm seeking to be honest.
Right. No, but I'm just saying people might react
because
that
people
way.
are cynical about
politics. Oh, I know people are cynical about politics, but the whole reason that I've been honest about it, and I tend to actually be one of those unusual politicians that always shares exactly what I think and who I am, is because I'm not that kind of person. I really don't do politics for that reason. I really want to do the best for my community, all of my community. And I struggle like anybody else who's in this position. Those politicians who come out and determinedly tell you this is right, everything is black. Most things aren't black; they're gray. You know, there's hazy. Policy decisions are largely hazy gray, and you have to make the best decision possible. And normally it's not about me. Normally it's a lot easier to decide about policy, and because I have very fixed views on policy versus what's the right thing for me and my constituents is. But I want to make the right decision. I know that today, right, with the pressure from my Jewish community about where they think things are going, I'm not going to make everybody happy with whatever I do. But I want to try to do the best thing for everybody, and I know that some people will not be happy with it.
Last question, we have to wrap up. You know, Liberals in the polls are doing terribly. Conservatives continue to hold a pretty big lead. I know there's not an election tomorrow, but assuming this continues to be the case, and all of a sudden the Liberals lose, you're left kind of blowing in the wind if you haven't made a decision. Is that part of what you're considering now?
No, I mean, my riding, so my riding is a 58-24 Liberal riding, right? I won by 34 points in the last election. Were I to leave the Liberal Party, nobody could possibly be saying that I was doing that for self-gain or or to further my political career, or that I was jumping off a sinking ship. That's not what it wouldn't be for that. I think that whether I'm in government or whether I'm in opposition before or after the next election, I don't think changes how I represent the constituents of Mount Royal. Like, and whatever party I would be in, or an independent or whatever, I would still represent my constituents in the same way.
Okay.
And once you've read the tea leaves, you'll let us know.
Yes.
Exactly.
I'll definitely, again, when I know what I'm doing, I'll certainly let everybody know what I'm doing. My constituents need to know, my party needs to know, everybody needs to know, and so I will do it. And I love politics. I love being an MP, and I plan to stay. I just need to figure out in what direction I can make the most difference.
We thank you so much for giving us the time this morning, Anthony. Wish you the best of luck.
Thanks very much, Aaron.
It's going to wrap
Thanks,
up
Bill.
another edition of the Corner Booth podcast here from the Soden Deli. We'll see you again soon.